Ignoring the political attacks, Pericles raided the war chest and started to build the Parthenon. At 101 feet wide and 228 feet long, it called for thousands of tons of expensive marble. The glittering stone, as it was called, was selected from the quarries that still remain at Mount Pentelicon, 8 miles from Athens. But a special technique was needed to drag the massive column drums up the steep slopes of the Acropolis.
The Acropolis is high above the city. Getting the drums up here on a cart would have been pretty difficult. So they probably used a system that they'd devised over a century before, where they built a wooden frame around the drum, and then using oxen, they could pull the stones up the hill, a bit like a roller.
At the building site, they probably used cranes with a pulley system to lift vast blocks of stone. Lifting power came from a windlass attached to the back of the frame.
Once they got the blocks and stones up here, they had to maneuver them into position with absolute precision. There's a clue here as to how they did that. These are bosses that were used for lifting ropes to carry the stones. They would normally have been cut off, but war broke out before the workers had finished.
But the underlying genius of the building lies in the ancient Greeks' understanding of perspective, unsurpassed until the Renaissance. At every stage, the builders countered each optical distortion to make this temple appear to be perfect.
Down here at the base, you can actually see that deviation from the horizontal. There's a very subtle rise along the step line here towards the middle, which drops off at the far side. And that gives us the impression from a distance of a perfect straight line.
They created the columns with the same minute attention to detail.
On the outside of the building, all these exterior columns slope inwards a bit. And they did that really to help build the grandeur of the design, that feeling of elegance. And they did that by cutting the top surface of the bottom drum so that it sloped inwards perceptibly. Here on the corner, of course, the bottom drum is turned slightly, so the corner column rises up on a diagonal with extraordinary precision right up towards the center of the building.
The Greek builders addressed every detail.
You might have thought these great stone blocks weren't moving anywhere, but the ancient Greeks did use cramps to hold them together. This is one of the original ancient iron cramps and the actual hole that it came from that's been recently excavated. And it would have sat in here like this, filled with molten lead, which then set, holding those blocks together. In fact, the cramps don't carry a lot of force in everyday use. But in the case of an earthquake, these cramps would have helped just to hold the stones together. Maybe that's one of the reasons that the building's still here today.
The centerpiece of this enormous building was to be found inside. Here, Phidias designed the most lavish and impressive statue. It depicted the goddess Athena, to whom the building was dedicated. It was a masterpiece of ivory and gold. It was so extravagant, it absorbed over half the funds for the entire Parthenon project. At nearly 40 feet high, Athena dominated the interior, intimidating all who came to worship at the temple.
The statue of Athena had on it over a ton of gold. It cost slightly more to put that gold onto the statue than it did to build the whole of the Parthenon.
A stunning frieze, 524 feet long, depicted the annual procession in honor of Athena. The pale marble we see today would have looked very different 2,500 years ago, when it was painted in vivid colors. But the masterpiece was not an immediate success in its time. Pericles' opponents said he was dressing the Parthenon up like a pretentious woman, a slur both on his building and on his partner Aspasia, born outside the Athens elite.
One Greek writer tells us exactly what a pretentious woman did. She put on built-up shoes to make her look taller, to suggest she was a more aristocratic family. She put on dabs of rouge on her cheeks to make it seem that she was younger and fitter than she really was. But above all, she plastered her face in powder of white lead, fashionably pale to look like an aristocrat. And they thought of the pretentiousness of Pericles in using other Greeks' gold to make Athens seem wealthier than she really was.
To further discredit Pericles, Phidias, his sculptor and master of works, was accused of embezzling gold from the statue. He was also accused of blasphemy for portraying himself and his patron among the sacred figures on Athena's shield.
Phidias the sculptor seems to have been a friend of Pericles. We're told that he was imprisoned in Athens for embezzlement of the gold. But Phidias and his fellow craftsmen were not seen as heroes of civilization as we'd want to make them now.
A scandal for a few years in its own time, the Parthenon is now a landmark of architectural excellence for all time. The ravages of war and pollution have taken their toll, but still the temple stands.
The Parthenon is a huge statement of a building, what you might call an iconic structure. It's a coming together of understanding of stone and rock and how to use it and work it, and of geometry and shape and form, something that really wasn't achieved again for thousands of years.
These 7 wonders of ancient Greece are the legacy of one of the greatest civilizations. They showed mankind the imagination and inventiveness, the courage and conviction to lead architecture into the modern world.